Hi, everybody. Welcome to Virtually Visiting Poets, episode 5, in which we have a new superhero. His name is Bryan Dietrich. He's one of my favorite all-time poets. He's a poet who does extraordinary things. He works in form, and at the same time, he works with popular culture materials often. He has wonderful books of poetry about Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Star Trek, etc. And he has a new one that I'd like him to tell us all about. Can you tell us about the Demeter Diaries? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, the one that just came out this year is called the Demeter Diaries. It's co-written with Margaret Simon. It's a love story between Dracula and Mina Murray. And because in our version, she never becomes Mina Harker. She falls in love with Dracula and things go, well or badly, depending on your perspective. It is a vampire love story after all. And we alternate poems. So her taking on the voice of Mina and I'm the voice of Dracula.
In this sequence, is it also like your other books written in a particular form?
There are a lot of different forms for the Dracula portion. By the way, it's just about a month ago. They let me know that it's a finalist for the Bram Stoker Award.
Oh, that's wonderful! Congratulations.
So it's that's the newest one. Then after that, I've got another one coming out next month or the month after, and it's going to be personal poems. It's called Starting to Nod.
Okay, fantastic. So let me ask you this. What's the advantage of having a particular form when you're dealing with popular culture material versus free verse? People do it both ways. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if I go back to the first book, Krypton Nights, which is all Superman poems, the first, it's a sequence of 5 voices. And it begins with Superman or Clark Kent talking about himself and talking about all of the restrictions that he has on his identity and on his life. Part of it because he has to be somebody else half the time. Part of it because he's, super and has to keep that in check and not actually punch through someone's face, for example. So those particular poems, those first 7 poems are all sonnets. It's actually a crown of sonnets. And that structure of the sonnet being so compact and so intense, I think form in general intensifies poems as far as I'm concerned. It certainly intensifies my experience in writing them. But in this particular case, it also, I think, dovetails with the theme of those particular poems being in a box.
Do you feel, I think the days when popular culture materials were verboten for poetry are long over, but nonetheless, do you feel that writing in form gives them a certain amount of extra credence or street cred?
I think sometimes they have been seen that way because of the form. I think winning awards doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
I think placing them in good places helps. But I do think there's still some prejudice out there against the kinds of things that I like doing most. I mean, I write all kinds of poems. I don't just write pop culture poems, but I think for a long time I was sort of balkanized because of that. One of the reasons why you'd ask me about writing in form, and I think it condenses the experience of the words, but writing in the realm of pop culture, at least on the surface, allows you to talk about very deep, sometimes very personal things, and it prevents you from scaring yourself or your reader away from the topic, right? I mean, these poems, all the Superman poems, they're really about my father, they're about God, they're about faith, they're about a lot of different things. they're just on the surface, that patina of pop culture allows me to talk about those things in a safe way. The newest poems, the Dracula poems, those are really about I had the experience about a year and a half ago. I went into the hospital for emergency spinal surgery, and I was very worried about my future and about my life and leaving my wife behind. And so it allowed me to talk about some of those fears and write love poems as if I were already dead.
Mm-hmm.
And not to get too maudlin about it, right? So I could actually do it without fear of, well, as I say, scaring myself away from the topic or scaring a reader away.
It's a form of misdirection or
Yeah.
dissociation, kind of quicks and tricks, a little sleight of hand.
Yeah, so I think that the assignment that I've suggested here as an elegy in the realm of comics can do the same kind of thing. You might end up finding yourself, if you're doing this assignment, writing about someone real, but writing about it through the lens of a character.
Thank you, Bryan. So maybe let's take a shift here and have you read whatever sort of poems that you like. They could be new ones or old ones. Would you read us a couple of poems? And
Sure. In fact, I think I'll just do I'll do a Superman and a Batman. We'll start there. So this is called I Kent. And this is, of course, Superman speaking. Listen, it isn't even my planet. I just work here. A man of letters, mild-mannered nerves of less than steel. Yes, I can outrun most anything, thieves, mid-range sports sedans, shoemaker levy, can chew a mouthful of coal to a cud of diamonds. But I'm not as Delphic as you dream. I get sleep apnea, hemorrhoids, runs in my tights. I like Gilligan's Island and late-night horror flick medleys, thermonuclear trust funds, Greenpeace for guns, heavy metal milk lobbyists. None of it gets me wet the way it used to. If I could, I'd curl up with my cape, an old comic, an orange soda, a little Vivaldi. No telephone booths, just Ming the Merciless to take me away. Oh well. Shit happens, worlds collide, babes fall out of the sky, grow up, get lives. My flat's just over there. No, the brownstone. Yeah, that one. Corner room, third from, no, up. Anyway, I took this position because, frankly, it looked like a job for me. Now I'm not so sure anymore. I'm tired of being, well, necessary. You don't know what it's like. Hardly feeling a thing, seeing through people, overhearing assassination plots 2 countries over, and still needing new underwear every Christmas. One day I hate the boots, belt, bikini, this S applique. The next, well, I feel like punching every horn-rimmed dweeb I see. Dad warned me it might be like this. Son, he said, you'll just want to come home. Problem is, I can't.
That's cool.
So that's that one. And this one is actually one of the Batman sequence poems that isn't finished yet. But this showed up in poetry. It's Batman speaking, and it's called Gotham Wanes. The mask, because we were never ugly enough, because our ugliness was epic, because we were given to it, because we were so misgiven. You wear one, I wear one. Yes, kings, pharaohs had them fabricated, poured out in gold and beaten. Most wore them to the grave. In Mexico, the living wear them, not to scare the dead away, but as invitation. They leave candy on the mounds of those they mourn. New Orleans, Women wear them in order to bear everything else. Men wear them in order to watch. I can remember back before it all grows grim, making one out of the news, trying to paste it together. I remember my mother helping me. I don't really remember my father. Something like a face, like the man in the moon. I understand we're hardwired this way, to make faces before anything else. It's why we see the Madonna in mold, alien architecture and Martian crater creep. We keep looking for those first faces, first familia, every culture, every eon. Witness the oldest we know, this cave, his wall, 170 centuries gone. They call it sorcerer. They call me night. We have always lived in the dark.
It's cool. Particularly apropos these days when people are having to make their own homemade masks in order to stay alive in the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for that. Got another one for us?
Sure. Let me do something a little different. It's still using I suppose, a kind of facade. But this is more personal. I wrote this when I was going through a divorce, and it uses a metaphor of Atlantis. So it's called Atlantis. I've all but forgotten now what it was like. There was a time when I remembered the way, the long rowing toward it, deep timbers in the earth, flexing beneath all I could see. The sea, what I knew of it, pitching me forward, back, now lofted, now reprieved. Elation at every crest, darker tidings in the hollows. I shouldn't admit this now, but I never owned a sextant, couldn't name the stars. Every journey outward toward what awaited me was, well, luck. That was the glory of it, I suppose, the never knowing, the ever-present likelihood of falling short. You see, eventually the way stopped being a gift. Old paths etched their windings into me, mapped me the way lightning filigrees window glass. And I was left clutching my oar in a lost land I found too familiar. Or maybe it found me wanting. Regardless, I retraced my steps to the little coracle in which I'd come, set my back to what land I already felt sinking, and attempted not so much a return as another failure. If only, I thought, I could snag a landing I was no longer sure of, some mysterious island with no discernible mooring, afloat, submersible, vast, a last missed kiss, something, everything. I've all but forgotten now. Finally now that I've arrived.
Strong one. Thank you very much, Bryan. I wonder, to shift into another mode, whether for those who are writing themselves or are teaching classes with students who want to do some creative writing, whether you have an inspirational exercise or productive writing exercise you might want to present to them?
I thought we'd just do something fairly simple rather than try to get into, say a sestina or a tonka or something like that, something a little more open. So I'd like to talk about the possibility of doing an elegy well, given our times right now, something in memorial of a past person. But in this case, let's make it pop culture and write an elegy about either a superhero or a supervillain as written by another superhero or supervillain. So, for example, you could have Superman has passed, and you imagine Lex Luthor speaking on the occasion of his death.
Mm-hmm.
Or Thanos has passed away, and Thor has to speak at the funeral. Of course, I guess in that case, it'd be mostly like blown leaves. You could have, oh goodness, Catwoman has passed away, and Black Canary has to speak about her death. I think the idea is to find someone who would have something to say, but also would be either invested in that person in a significant way or a little upset about having to say something about them having passed away.
Absolutely.
So Batman speaking at the Joker's funeral, for example, to create some kind of tension there. If the students are looking for examples, some of my favorites, there's Percy Shelley's Adonis. There's In Memory of William Butler Yeats by W.H. Auden. Another one of Auden's that I love is Funeral Blues, which is beautiful. There's, of course, always Plath's Daddy, or Anne Sexton's poem that she wrote about Sylvia Plath herself. There's Oh Captain, My Captain by Whitman. So I would say, go out, Google them, look up a few elegies by some famous poets and see what they do. And you're going to find that there are many different kinds and many different forms, some free verse, some in form. See what's there, see how they approach it, and then imagine yourself then in the world of the comic books and take on a voice. Now, of course, you could always write it as a real piece about someone who you really know who has actually died in the real world, but keep it a little light and maybe do this in the realm of the comics.
Thank you, Bryan, and thank you for virtually visiting with us today. I give you a hand, and the audience who is invisible to us now does so as well. Thank you again for taking the time to share with us.
Thank you.